Alasia was not fathered by your husband, who recently passed away. Slept with a married man. You claim Mr. Richardson is your daughter's father.
Your Honor, at my husband's deathbed, I had asked him, did he want to see his child? So he kept telling me all the way until he took his last breath that she was not his child.
Know who I was sleeping with? I'm not that type of person, never have been.
That you were sleeping with no one else?
Until I was with the mom one day, and I told her that he had asked me to marry him in a text. He told me that they were separated and that he was waiting on her to pay for a divorce because he couldn't do it.
Some people believe they are prepared for the truth, but the moment a DNA test arrives, they realize that the truth changes everything. In the courtroom, led by Judge Lauren Lake, questions of identity, loyalty, responsibility, and justice are not just abstract ideas. They are deeply personal realities that shape the lives of individuals and families for generations. When the subject of a DNA test arises, it is never merely about biology. It becomes a test of relationships, emotional history, personal accountability, and the willingness to face truth even when that truth is painful. Many people regret taking these tests, not because the science is wrong, but because the truth removes the comfort of uncertainty. Truth forces clarity, and clarity demands emotional reckoning. When individuals step into the courtroom, they are standing not only before the law, but also before the emotional consequences of their past choices. In the stage of a divorce case, for example, evidence is not only legal documentation, it is also memory, regret, betrayal, and hope. The relationship between law and justice becomes complex. Law defines what can be proved, but justice is about what feels right. This conflict is central in many stories where parentage is questioned and trust is disrupted. Judge Lauren Lake does not simply deliver verdicts. She guides individuals through the uncomfortable process of understanding that justice is not always gentle, and truth is not always comforting. The courtroom environment in these cases often resembles what one might hear discussed in thoughtful conversations like those on the Game Changing Attorney podcast, where lawyers talk about how emotional realities shape legal outcomes. In similar fashion, the courtroom becomes a place where the concept of justice in jurisprudence must be re-examined through the lens of lived human experience, not just legal codes. The DNA test cheating stories that arise in this environment highlight how fragile relationships can be. When infidelity or blurred timelines of intimacy enter the narrative, individuals begin questioning their own memory of love and their understanding of commitment. The test becomes not only proof of biology, but also a mirror reflecting choices made in loneliness, confusion, or desire. For some, this reflection is devastating. For others, it is liberating. There are also cases where individuals come to court seeking child support, sometimes referencing processes similar to those discussed in the Divorce Course podcast, where people learn how family law shapes financial obligations. When a potential father denies biological connection, the legal consequences become significant. Under the framework seen in some Supreme Court child support rulings, biological responsibility cannot be avoided once proven. Yet before reaching that determination, emotional tension rises. Will this DNA test heal a relationship or permanently divide it? The presence of the Adverse Inference in Evidence Act is also seen indirectly in these situations. When someone refuses to take or delays a test, the law may interpret that hesitation as a sign of guilt or avoidance. This is why many individuals feel cornered, pressured to accept outcomes they fear. The courtroom does not judge emotions. It judges actions and evidence. However, the emotional dimension remains deeply visible. Many participants share what might be considered celebrate recovery testimonies. They speak of overcoming addiction, trauma, heartbreak, cycles of abandonment, and childhood wounds. Their voices often tremble as they describe how the absence of fatherhood or motherhood shaped their self-worth. The DNA test in these cases becomes a turning point in personal recovery, not simply the end of a legal dispute. People often come into the courtroom with the belief that clarity will bring peace, yet peace requires acceptance. Acceptance is difficult when the truth contradicts the story one has told themselves for years. And so, people regret taking the test, not because they wanted lies, but because they wanted hope. Hope, however, is fragile when built on assumptions. Episodes that involve adoption stories, full episodes, often reveal another layer of emotional complexity. Sometimes, a child seeks a biological connection not out of legal need, but because they want identity. They want to know where they come from. Even adults who grew up in loving adoptive homes sometimes feel a silent, persistent curiosity. Their search is not about replacing the family they have, but completing the story of who they are. In these situations, Judge Lauren Lake's approach is firm but compassionate. She acknowledges the importance of origins while also reinforcing the value of chosen family. When the DNA test reveals an unexpected truth, reactions differ. Some individuals collapse emotionally, realizing that their understanding of their past was built on a misunderstanding. Others feel vindicated, having been denied acknowledgement for years. Both outcomes are heavy. The courtroom responds not with celebration or condemnation, but with structure, order, and guidance. The law does not fix emotional wounds, but it provides clarity that can become a foundation for healing. There are also stories in which one partner suspected cheating, fueled by subtle changes in behavior, emotional distance, or unexplained secrecy. These are the moments where personal intuition meets legal resolution. The DNA test becomes the objective measure that either validates or disproves emotional suspicion. For many, the truth changes everything because it sets reality in place of speculation. Once reality is known, one cannot return to uncertainty. Clarity is both a gift and a burden. This is where Judge Lauren Lake's role is especially meaningful. Her courtroom is not designed merely to resolve disputes. It is structured to guide people through the emotional significance of truth. She recognizes that while the courtroom follows the law, the individuals standing within it are experiencing human vulnerability. The relationship between law and justice becomes something living, evolving, and deeply personal. The emotional weight of a DNA test in family disputes often exposes the deepest insecurities about belonging. Some individuals walk into Judge Lauren Lake's courtroom seeking answers about their identity, while others enter attempting to protect the identity they already believe to be true. In both situations, the test becomes more than scientific documentation. It becomes a defining moment for personal truth. When watching these circumstances unfold, one can understand why people regret taking DNA tests. The regret does not come from the logic of discovering biological truth, but rather from the emotional cost. Many individuals have invested years into relationships, memories, and stories about who they believe themselves to be. When the results contradict these stories, the foundation of their identity begins to shift. The truth changes everything, because it forces people to rebuild their understanding of themselves from a new starting point. In the discussion surrounding evidence in the stage of a divorce case, the courtroom becomes a space where emotions, narratives, and legal standards intersect. Witnesses provide statements, documents are reviewed, and the DNA test result arrives as a definitive piece of evidence. Yet even with scientific certainty, the emotional interpretation remains subjective. The law can determine biological connection, but it cannot dictate how individuals should feel about that connection. This tension is what makes these cases so profound and compelling. Judge Lauren Lake's role is to balance compassion with clarity. She does not allow avoidant behavior to interfere with the search for truth. Her approach often reminds viewers of discussions on platforms like the Game-Changing Attorney podcast, where conversations revolve around the reality that legal professionals deal not just with law, but with the emotional complexities of the people involved. The relationship between law and justice is never purely academic in these situations. It is deeply human. Sometimes individuals try to rely on incomplete narratives to avoid emotional pain. This is where principles similar to those found in the Adverse Inference in Evidence Act come into play. When a person refuses to participate in testing or tries to delay proceedings, the law interprets this hesitation not as confusion, but as potential avoidance. People fear how the truth will alter their relationships, their reputations, and their future obligations. yet avoidance itself becomes a type of admission in the eyes of the law. Some cases also mirror topics explored in the Divorce Course podcast, where discussions often center around how separation impacts not only the couple but also the children involved. When the DNA test becomes part of a custody or child support issue, the stakes become even higher. The involvement of the Supreme Court Child Support Framework underscores that biological connection has long-term financial, emotional, and social consequences. A parent cannot simply walk away when science proves a responsibility exists. On the other hand, when the test reveals non-paternity, there is a different kind of emotional devastation. Someone who believed themselves responsible, someone who may have cared deeply for a child, must now reevaluate their place. The law may release them from obligation, but the heart does not detach easily. People sometimes express shock that the child they raised, loved, and emotionally claimed is not their biological family. In these moments, Judge Lauren Lake reinforces that love does not need biology to be meaningful. Yet she is also clear that truth must still be acknowledged. This is where the concept of justice in jurisprudence becomes critical. Justice is not about rewarding feelings. It is about aligning reality with responsibility. In some situations, the test forces individuals to confront their own past choices. For instance, in DNA test cheating stories, the narrative often exposes secret relationships, overlapping timelines, or emotional confusion during periods of personal vulnerability. These circumstances highlight that betrayal is not always malicious. Sometimes it is the result of unresolved emotional wounds, temporary loneliness, or fear of abandonment. However, the consequences remain real. The courtroom then becomes, in many ways, a place of emotional unmasking. People who once hid behind silence or denial are suddenly confronted with clear proof. Truth removes ambiguity, and ambiguity often acts as emotional protection. Without that protection, individuals are left exposed. Some respond with anger, others with sorrow, and some with relief. Judge Lauren Lake remains steady through these reactions, holding each person accountable to honesty while acknowledging the pain they may be experiencing. For those who have endured trauma, loss, or emotional instability, the revelations brought forth by a DNA test can resemble celebrate recovery testimonies. Individuals speak about past mistakes, childhood neglect, or cycles of abuse that shape their emotional patterns. They discuss how their upbringing influenced their choices in relationships, sometimes leading to repeating familiar pain. In these moments, the DNA test is not just about determining parentage. It becomes part of a larger narrative of healing, accountability, and growth. There are also many situations involving adoption stories, full episodes, where individuals come in search of biological parents not because they lack family, but because they want truth. These cases often highlight the human desire to understand one's origins. Identity is not only defined by the people who raised us, but also by the people from whom we came. Even when adoption families are loving and supportive, the sense of unfinished identity can linger. Judge Lauren Lake recognizes that the search is not an act of rejection, but one of completion. However, not all participants in these cases seek clarity for emotional reasons. Some individuals approach the courtroom with intentions related to financial stability. When child support enters the equation, the DNA test becomes essential evidence. The law must protect the welfare of the child, regardless of personal conflicts between adults. Yet emotional responses vary. Some parents welcome confirmation because it validates what they have always believed. Others react defensively, feeling that acknowledgement obligates them to a future they did not expect. These emotional shifts often unfold slowly as people begin to process the meaning of the test result. Understanding biological truth does not instantly resolve emotional confusion. Healing requires reflection. In many cases, Judge Lauren Lake encourages counseling, co-parenting conversations, or gradual rebuilding of trust. She emphasizes that while the law can define responsibilities, individuals must choose how they will move forward emotionally. The truth changes everything because it forces transformation. People can no longer rely on assumptions or past narratives. They must now act with awareness, Some find this freeing, as clarity allows them to release doubt and insecurity. Others struggle because clarity forces accountability they were not prepared to embrace. This is why DNA tests in family cases hold such powerful emotional resonance. They are not merely pieces of paper, they are catalysts for profound change. They clarify not only lineage but also identity, responsibility, and emotional truth. In the closing movement of these emotional journeys, the courtroom becomes a place where people must face themselves. Judge Lauren Lake reminds everyone that the DNA test is not the verdict on their worth as a person. Instead, it is a tool for truth. Yet truth has a way of reshaping relationships, sometimes in ways that feel like loss, other times like liberation. One of the most significant revelations that emerges from these cases is the understanding that biology alone does not define family. A biological father may be proven through testing, but the emotional reality of fatherhood requires presence, commitment, and intention. Likewise, a mother may reveal that the emotional support she provided was shaped by her own struggles, fears, and unmet needs. These realizations mirror themes often discussed in conversations about the relationship between law and justice. Justice must account for human complexity, not just legal frameworks, yet law operates on clarity, not emotional nuance. This is why DNA tests hold so much legal power. Biological truth becomes the foundation for decisions regarding child support, inheritance, medical history, and familial identity. In cases that reach higher judicial levels, such as Supreme Court child support matters, the rulings reflect the principle that a child deserves stability, regardless of how complicated the adult's relationships may have been. The law prioritizes the welfare of the child, even when emotional tensions remain unresolved among the adults. However, emotional truth does not always align immediately with legal truth. When a DNA test establishes paternity, the father may still need time to emotionally accept the role. Likewise, when the test disproves biological parentage, the emotional bond that existed does not vanish simply because the law recognizes no genetic link. This emotional dissonance is a central element in many stories where people regret taking DNA tests. Those regrets often come not from the test itself, but from the sudden shift in identity and belonging. Individuals who built emotional connection on assumptions may feel grief, similar to the grief discussed in Celebrate Recovery testimonies. They speak of learning to accept a new reality while trying to maintain compassion for themselves and others. They describe feeling unsteady, as though the foundation of their life has shifted. Yet these same individuals often express that truth, no matter how painful, was necessary. Growth rarely comes without discomfort. When Judge Lauren Lake delivers results, she emphasizes responsibility. She reminds parents that the child's emotional security should come before adult conflict. She encourages honesty, communication, and the acknowledgement of emotional wounds. These conversations echo broader themes found in resources such as the Divorce Course podcast, where individuals learn how to navigate separation and co-parenting with dignity. The focus remains on the child, the future, and the healing process, rather than dwelling endlessly on past mistakes. In some cases, individuals recognize patterns passed down through generations. They speak about not knowing their own father and how that absence influenced the choices they made in relationships. They describe falling into cycles of searching for affirmation, repeating unhealthy attachments, or fearing commitment. When the DNA test forces truth into the open, these individuals often express a desire to break the cycle. They want the next generation to grow up with clarity, stability, and emotional support. This desire reflects a deeper philosophical concept of justice in jurisprudence. Justice is not only about correcting the past, but also about preventing future harm. At times, the testimonies resemble adoption stories' full episodes in their emotional tone. People describe learning to separate biological identity from emotional belonging. A person may discover they are not biologically connected to the parent who raised them, yet still recognize that love, time, and care hold meaningful value. Similarly, a person who discovers a biological parent may feel both excitement and fear, questioning how to build a new relationship without erasing the life they have already lived. Judge Lauren Lake consistently encourages people to respect both truths, where they came from and who raised them. There are also cases involving overlapping relationships, secret connections, or uncertainty during periods of emotional vulnerability. These are often referred to as DNA test cheating stories. When these stories come to light, individuals must reckon with the emotional consequences of choices made during moments of confusion or loneliness. Trust is fragile, and when broken, the process of rebuilding requires patience and willingness to face uncomfortable truths. Yet even in these cases, Judge Lauren Lake does not frame individuals as villains. She understands that human behavior is shaped by emotional history and that accountability must be paired with compassion. The DNA test in these contexts becomes a catalyst for emotional honesty. It ends speculation. It forces adults to stop hiding behind assumptions, silence, or denial. Truth does not wait for emotional readiness. Truth demands recognition. People often express that once the results are spoken aloud, the emotional energy of the room changes. The uncertainty that weighed on everyone now lifts, leaving space for clarity. Whether that clarity brings sorrow or relief depends on the circumstances, but clarity itself is stabilizing. Judge Lauren Lake often speaks directly to the emotional heart of the issue. She reminds individuals that healing is possible. She reinforces that identity is not destroyed by truth but refined by it. She encourages forgiveness, not as a dismissal of pain, but as a commitment to emotional freedom. These closing reflections mirror the tone found in thoughtful legal and emotional discussions, such as those sometimes heard in the Game-Changing Attorney podcast, where emotional intelligence is recognized as essential in navigating legal conflict. Some cases conclude with individuals choosing to rebuild relationships. They make plans to take small steps toward trust, communication, and shared responsibility. Other cases end in acceptance that the emotional journey will continue outside the courtroom. The test results may resolve legal questions, but emotional healing unfolds over time. The court does not demand immediate emotional transformation. Instead, it provides a framework for truth, accountability, and structure. The individuals involved must choose how they will move forward. Some will seek counseling. Some will turn to community support. Some will reflect quietly, processing gradually. Some will decide to rebuild, while others will choose separation. All paths require courage. What remains consistent in every case is this: the truth changes everything. Truth offers clarity where confusion once lived. It provides direction where uncertainty lingered. It allows individuals to rebuild relationships on honest ground rather than assumption. It allows children to know their origins, not to replace love, but to enrich understanding. It allows adults to break generational cycles and create new patterns founded on emotional strength rather than emotional survival. In Judge Lauren Lake's courtroom, the DNA test is never just a medical document. It is a moment of revelation, identity, responsibility, and transformation. The courtroom becomes a space where law and humanity intersect. Decisions are made according to legal standards, but the emotional experience of truth belongs entirely to the individuals who must now live with it. Some will leave feeling lighter, others heavier. Some will walk away with new beginnings, others with difficult endings. But all will walk away knowing the truth. And once truth is known, no one can return to the uncertainty that existed before it.